Alright, so I'm about 5 minutes removed from watching UFC Fight Night Apex Gilbert Burns versus Michael Moraels. This was actually a pretty violent card for the lack of names that were notable through the list of fights. This guy, Michael Moraels, is an absolute animal. As soon as he notched this win, they moved his record for consecutive wins through welterweight from 5 to 6, and that would place him right behind Sean Brady, I think it is, at 7. And then also Shavkat Rakhmonov there at 7 too. And the fact that their names were right next to each other just made me think about how sweet this fight would be. I want to talk about Michael Moraels as a striker before I start matchmaking him with other people that would be interesting to see him fight with at this division. Michael Moraels, his arms are like, you know the gumball vending machines at the grocery store, and they sell like the rubber sticky hands that you could slap people with them from like 8 feet away? Those are his arms. He comes out, low kick, jab. Gilbert Burns telegraphs the hell out of this calf kick, but it still meets its mark because whenever he does actually let it go, it reaches its target in less than 1/10 of a second. Miles Moraels is on a very beautiful jab. A few fighters came out with a very nice jab tonight. A rudimentary fundamental of boxing is to work behind your jab and to develop a strong jab to put the rest of your game behind. And yet some MMA fighters fancy themselves boxers and don't jab, and their entire boxing offense is just big hooks on the inside or closing range with big hooks or throwing a left hand or something if they're southpaw. Very nice jab on Michael Moraels. He was finding the mark with the jab, getting Gilbert Burns to raise his guard very high, and whenever he would do that and shell up like this, Michael Moraels could throw the right hand either from the southpaw as a lead hook or as a rear hook from orthodox and wrap it all the way around the guard. The first shot that landed to open the fight where I was like, ooh, it was this right hook that he landed from southpaw. Michael Moraels reached so far around Gilbert Burns' head and his guard that he punched him in the spinal cord damn near. And Gilbert Burns' leg shook and I was like, oh yeah, this fight is done. From the boxing perspective, Michael Moraels is like all the best parts of Kevin Holland, MVP, and Carlos Prates. But it's all combined into a fighter who can actually wrestle. And defensively, he was doing so well against the takedowns of Gilbert Burns. He was forcing the shots out of Gilbert Burns with the boxing because there's no way that Gilbert Burns was ever going to be able to stand with this guy. He was controlling the distance so well. All of Gilbert Burns' attempts to land were just either rolled or pulled. And Michael Moraels was just always posting his hand and making sure that there was a dead zone where Gilbert Burns couldn't hit him. Through this post, he was setting up the right and left hand. Stand switches, like there was no real dominant weapon that he had through this fight because as soon as he would land a good left hand, he would switch stances and then fire the right, and it would land equally as hard. Whenever he does get fighters shelled up, his accuracy is amazing. Since he blasts a jab so hard, you have to put your guard high, and whenever you do that, he's able to control exactly how the right hand lands and where it lands, and he's just glassing people across the chin with these rights that are landing with laser accuracy. His mannerisms are pretty sporadic and energetic like he's a young fighter, but that just shows promise, the fact that he's still able to get first round finishes over fighters like Gilbert Burns as he's still developing. Michael Moraels is going to be a lethal weapon in this division. I think that the lack of fear that he shows towards getting knocked out in his pocket exchanges, and also the good IQ that he comes out with in these fights to make sure to control exchanges where he wants them to happen, is a very good quality for a fighter to have. Michael Moraels is a special and gifted fighter. As a boxer, he is also one of the best boxers in MMA, and I could definitely see him marching straight to that belt and challenging. I'm not sure if he takes it off of JDM, because through that long reach, there are exposed openings for a guy with tighter combinations than Gilbert Burns displayed tonight to probably catch him through, but he looks like a world beater. I'll tell you, he looks like a middleweight. They were talking about they didn't understand how this guy cut down to 185. I don't either. This dude is a massive welterweight. 170 has a guy that they need to really watch out for. And we're doing all this glazing of Rakhmonov and Gary and stuff. Moraels said that he wanted to expose Gary and shut his mouth. He might be able to do it. So I think that we definitely give him a shot to try to prove this, because if anyone can, it's this dude. And my fault, I called him Brazilian the other day. He's actually Ecuadorian, so I'm sorry about that. My bad. They don't even do Brazilian on Brazilian fights really like that, so I should have seen that one. This was a splendid fight, a great addition to honestly a pretty good card. It superseded my expectations for it. I was very right, and then I was pretty wrong through a certain portion of this fight card, but I think we ended up getting things back on track towards the end. So I was right about this fight. 1-0 on the card. Michael Moraels wins in the cool purple fight kit. The co-main event was Soddiq Yusuf versus Mairon Santos. This was a decision that you would see between two featherweights on the prelims of a numbered card, because these guys are both ex-featherweights who are trying out a new division. Mairon Santos is just a better boxer than Soddiq Yusuf is as an MMA fighter, and that was just the entire story of this fight. Mairon Santos did a very good job of stuffing the shots. I won't say that he's a pure boxer because his wrestling defense actually looked very good. Through the early going, Santos was just sticking a very nice jab on Soddiq Yusuf, moving very well. Jab, 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 jab. Everything was happening off of the jab. Mairon Santos is a fighter who will get creative whenever he starts to find his rhythm, but even whenever he does throw like a spinning wheel kick or something, it's going to come after the jab. He uses the jab to set up nice body kicks, and even though he wasn't mixing the targets up with the jab, he was throwing hooks to the body on the inside, especially in the clinch. He was handling Soddiq Yusuf's grappling pressure very well, and he was getting the better out of all the exchanges where they would tie up. Soddiq Yusuf, I'm not really sure what he's doing, man. As a point fighter, he's not very good because his wrestling isn't super powerful. He's not very powerful in the striking. His kickboxing is pretty one-dimensional. As far as head movement goes, he wasn't doing a whole lot of that, just eating a jab. The second round happened, and Soddiq Yusuf had shot a takedown. It must have been a jab that busted his nose up and hurt him, and nobody really noticed it until he came back up for the shot. He was bleeding a ton. He was getting jabbed all throughout the first and second round, Soddiq Yusuf, by Mairon Santos, and then by the end of the second, his face was a mess. He was bleeding a lot out of his nose. Mairon Santos was just continuing to work. Mairon Santos demonstrated good low kick offense. I didn't really have much to say about this one. I would have said that Mairon Santos secured a rank position in featherweight, but as a lightweight, I genuinely don't know how he does in this division. Soddiq Yusuf probably isn't going to be around for much longer. This transition up to lightweight after, I think he's been on like a pretty considerable skid lately. I hope that it isn't that he loses his job, because I remember I did see a video of Peaks, the food reviewer, online. He went to Soddiq Yusuf's fight gym, and they did a little sparring match and wrestled, and Peaks got choked out by Soddiq Yusuf. And that was the last dub that I remembered out of him. We didn't end up getting a co-main event, which would have been Rodolfo Bellato versus Paul Craig, because Bellato ended up getting a stomach ache like 45 minutes before the fight. So at the announcement desk, they announced that that fight was no longer going to go down. I was honestly not really looking forward to seeing it happen, because if I could go back and pick again, I might have selected Rodolfo Bellato to win that fight. Maybe not, granted the circumstances now, because he would have been not healthy had he just still went out there and put on a fight anyways. But undisclosed health issues for Bellato. We don't get to see him fight Paul Craig. They're going to try to reschedule it for Newark, New Jersey, I think. Dustin Stoltzfus and Nursulton Ruziboev had a Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin classic. There was a head clash that happened in this fight. It might have been in the second round, I think it was. Dustin Stoltzfus ends up wrapping up a guillotine on Nursulton Ruziboev, but his torso is just so long. I actually do think that he might be 6'5". I was paying close attention to how tall he was compared to the ref and Dustin Stoltzfus, and I looked up how tall Dustin Stoltzfus is. 6 foot even. If they give each of the fighters on the roster an extra inch just to make them look more impressive as far as height goes, then Nursulton Ruziboev is 6'4", and he looks to be about so. He is very tall, very imposing, very physical as well, and he had a good chin. He has some level of padded stats on his early record. If you look at his opponents, they're like 4-25 and 3-10, some of them, and he's winning belts off of these guys in regional circuits and pro MMA. So I could have looked at that and really picked it apart and been like, Nursulton Ruziboev isn't very good at fighting. And he's not as good as his record would indicate, for sure. But I think he deserves his place in the UFC, because as far as how he's done here in the promotion and organization, he's done very well and has had great performances and a lot of stoppages over guys who are pretty good at fighting. Tonight would include Dustin Stoltzfus to that list. Dustin Stoltzfus looked really not bad. I was seeing some old Dana White Contender Series clips, and Dustin Stoltzfus at one point broke Joe Pyfer's arm with an elevated double leg takedown that Joe Pyfer posted to try to stop with his full force of his body coming down on, and his arm just broke at the elbow. It was really gross. But I guess that did happen for him. In this fight, Dustin Stoltzfus didn't look like a chump. He fought Nursulton Ruziboev. I thought that he had dropped him with a lead hook, but it was actually just a clash of heads that ended up getting Nursulton Ruziboev on the ground. Afterwards, he gets up, is controlling this fight again with a jab. Very nice for Nursulton Ruziboev. He's doubling up his jab, throwing his cross behind it. He's also feeling out range, which he starts setting up in the second round going into the third, and all throughout the third, this very long bolo uppercut. It ends up busting Dustin Stoltzfus' nose. The canvas looked like a pizza by the time that this fight happened, and this was only the featured fight of the night. Super violent war between the two. I wasn't even mad at the fact that it went to decision. Nursulton Ruziboev was demonstrating some very good striking. As far as kickboxing was going, nothing wicked high level, just staying behind the basics, Good head movement and counters off of poles, though, as Dustin Stoltzfus would lunge into enter range because he had to, because Nursulton Ruziboev is 6'4". Nursulton Ruziboev has definitely gotten a lot of reps in at the gym drilling pole counters because he was landing a lot of them throughout this fight. Dustin Stoltzfus was definitely suffering at the offense of Nursulton Ruziboev, especially whenever those uppercuts started coming and he was shooting for his life. I thought this was a good fight. Points for both fighters. Both of these guys are staples in the Apex. Julian Erosa versus Melquizael Costa made me so mad because if I would have watched just a little bit more footage on Melquizael Costa, I definitely would have picked him because I was this close to just going against my first instinct, which was Julian Erosa, and just saying that Melquizael Costa was just going to win this fight. Because he looks cool for one, and no, there's actually a reason why. He's been around fighting on the Apex for a very long time, and he always puts on good performances, and he stops his fights. Julian Erosa does the same thing, but Melquizael Costa probably was demonstrating better skills that I just didn't notice for the fights that I did watch versus what I remembered from Julian Erosa just recently. This is why we don't suffer from recency bias, and we thoroughly investigate the situation instead of just going with our guts at times. Your gut feelings are good, but we don't always lean into those. If I would have relied less on intuition here, I would have made the proper prediction in Melquizael Costa. I predicted properly the last 3 fights, but this one I did mess up on, and I should have got it right. Melquizael Costa came out and he boxed Julian Erosa's head off. And what did Julian Erosa do defensively? Nothing. No footwork, no head movement, no type of anything. He only started changing levels after he had already been beaten up pretty badly. Melquizael Costa was controlling this fight wherever it went. In the clinch, he was kneeing the crap out of Julian Erosa. In the boxing, he was always finding a mark for both of his hands to land in all of the combos that he was throwing, whether they were uppercuts, hooks, straight punches, jabs. Melquizael Costa was doing a really good job at this. Kicks as well. Melquizael Costa, his kicks were looking really good. Low kicks, used to set up high kicks. He was just smacking Julian Erosa around with his legs. Julian Erosa, he looked like a wounded animal and started throwing like spinning stuff out of desperation. He was very tired after some of the wrestling exchanges that they were in, and then also after just getting beaten up so badly. That's a crazy significant strike disparity right there. I should have rewatched the Fernando Padilla fight, and I would have picked Melquizael Costa in this match, most likely. Whenever Melquizael Costa started working his kicks, he was doing a really good job of creating the space to begin working his hands as well. Julian Erosa just couldn't get anything going. There were many different layers of Melquizael Costa's striking defense for him to get through, and he couldn't get through any of them. The first was the stance switch. Melquizael Costa was switching stances a bunch. The next were front kicks that he was pumping out a bunch. And then the third thing was the jab. And he wasn't really countering much, but Melquizael Costa was just going first. But he was kiting Julian Erosa around the cage and fighting off of the back foot. And whenever Julian Erosa thought that there was a dead zone that was created where he could either reset or try to go for his own offense, Melquizael Costa would perfectly time it so that he would be able to get his shots off first and shut down Julian Erosa. The fact that he didn't get knocked down in this fight was actually pretty spectacular. For all the finishes that happened, I thought this fight was going to end with Julian Erosa's face in the canvas. At the very beginning, I wasn't really worried because we've seen Julian Erosa go down in fights before and then pull a crazy win out of his back pocket, so I was like, alright, whatever. And then there was 30 seconds left in the third round, and I was like, oh my god, he's going to lose. And then he lost, so it sucks. But overall, 3-1 on the main card. I'll take it, I guess. I guess we'll take a closer look at a few of these fights since the co-main event got cut. Gabe Green versus Mattheus Camilo. So I was like, okay, this guy's got it in the bag. And it was looking like it at the very beginning. He was landing some pretty hard shots on Gabe Green. Gabe Green looked really gun-shy throughout the first round. And he got cleanly outstruck throughout this first 5 minutes. Gabe Green did look pretty chiseled for this weight class. You can't really shrink the size of your skull, though. So one thing that was funny to note is that even though he's no longer 170, he has the head of a welterweight on a lightweight's body. Even in this picture, I feel like he kind of looks like a Funko Pop. But the way that this fight ended up going, the way that it ended up stopping, it pissed me off so bad. Mattheus Camilo had this in the bag, man. He wraps up a Hail Mary triangle throughout this grappling sequence where Gabe Green is just trying to stand up in Mattheus Camilo's full guard. I don't know how he gets a hold of this triangle, but it is super tight. But it's just around like the crown of Gabe Green's head, basically. It's squeezing really hard, so I don't know how he didn't tap. But Mattheus Camilo dumps his gas tank trying to finish this triangle. He had an armbar triangle, He had a triangle armbar wrapped up at one point, and he was cranking the arm, and then he let it go and just passed it across the side of his head. But it wasn't around his neck, so he wasn't getting choked. It was just the top of his head getting squeezed. So as soon as he lost it, Mattheus Camilo was so gassed out that he just was like, man, it's over. I'm cooked. Camilo relinquishes control and just lays there and gets his back taken by Gabe Green. He wraps up a rear naked choke, and Camilo tapped to this RNC yesterday morning before all of us woke up out of bed. It was so early. That was just an indication of how tired he was. I hated to watch this fight go this way, but I guess Gabe Green is still working. He's been on a slide lately, and he had a 2-year layoff due to injuries, so he gets to keep his spot on the roster. They may give Mattheus Camilo another chance just because of the people that he knows and trains with, but this was a pretty good fight. Very violent again. I was wrong about it though, so that's 0-1 on the prelims. I think that I didn't end the prelims too well, but I started strong. Jared Gordon versus Thiago Moises. I got this fight very incorrect. Throughout the first round, Jared Gordon just completely shut down Thiago Moises' everything. In low kicks, Jared Gordon was landing harder calf kicks than Thiago Moises, and those were supposed to be like his specialty. In the boxing, Jared Gordon was doing so many things that were better than Thiago Moises. He was controlling the range. Jared Gordon was timing Thiago Moises' jab and coming over the top with this hook that ended up knocking him out, and he did it a couple of times throughout this fight. Very good performance for Jared Gordon. I slept on him, but I mean, he was doing really good in the King Green fight. Against Patty got injured, sure, but Jared Gordon, again, didn't look very bad. I was just very hung up on that Hack Prass decision loss, but he's demonstrated in this fight and in the Mark Madsen fight that if you give him a guy who doesn't have pretty technical boxing, he's probably going to flatline KO them. 0-2 on the count so far, no biggie. I have some very correct predictions that ended up hitting. Right here, we are 1-2 on the prelims. Yadier Del Valle came out and just took this guy down so easily. His boxing actually looked a lot more powerful than it did on the footage that I had watched going into this fight. Connor Mattheus just looked like a sacrificial lamb. I don't really know if he'll have a job come Tuesday whenever the new rankings update. I don't know whenever they make those decisions. It doesn't happen night of, but I usually see Burt MMA or Big Marcel post that these guys get cut around like Tuesday or Wednesday. It usually happens all at the same time. It'll be like 3 or 4 guys at once, and they had just fought Saturday. Hey, I'm praying for you, Connor Matthews. I hope that you're not on that list this time around, man. Luana Santos mercy killed Tainara Lisboa. This fight was pretty cool. I liked it. Luana Santos, she knew that Tainara Lisboa could be broken by her. All she had to do is just put a pace on her. So with the grappling, throughout the early going of the first round, she was controlling this fight, landing a bunch of strikes from top mounted positions. At range, she was also doing Tainara Lisboa in, working her boxing combos very well, throwing kicks, getting good reactions out of Tainara Lisboa, taking her down super easily in the second round, making it so that Tainara Lisboa had no option except for to invert her guard and try to wrap up a leg lock, and those don't even work, not even in WMMA anymore. Leg locks don't work in MMA. Luana Santos gets in like a scarf hold position. She ends up getting an Americana and bends Lisboa's elbow about like 180 degrees. It was really grotesque, and she verbally taps because her other hand is trapped under Luana Santos. Luana Santos wins, screams at the top of her lungs. I thought it would go something like this. So 2-2 on the prelims. Elise Reed versus Denise Gomez. Denise Gomez actually is big and scary. She did a good job in this one. Very nice counter right hand. Came over the top of Elise Reed's jab and spun her head all the way around like an owl. It was amazing. And she was controlling this fight in the grappling in the first round too. This was a failed walk down on the part of Elise Reed. She tried to get up in there and make the fight ugly at the very beginning of this fight, and she was scrambling to re-guard for her life within about 15 seconds of this attempt to pressure Denise Gomez. Denise Gomez's hands are very nice. She has big power. I will probably pick her to win a fight. She also has 3 knockouts now, which is going to be the record for women's strawweights knockouts. It was also set by Amanda Lemos, so they're tied together. Amanda Lemos has like 4.5 stars in striking in UFC 5, and it's because of the fact that she knocked out 3 women in this division. So Denise Gomez is already plastering her name on all of the billboards on the WMMA Guinness books because of the fact she has 3 stoppages in this division. Good for her, because if Elise Reed was just fighting another Elise Reed, this would have been a really tough watch. Hong Sung Park is massive, and he came in here and he said weight room. Carlos Hernandez, weight room. That's literally what Hong Sung Park told this man. They didn't do much striking on the feet. Hong Sung Park's boxing did look pretty good, but he transitioned to wrestling pretty fast, and I didn't expect this out of him much. got to the back very easily, sunk in a body triangle, good instincts on Hong Sung Park, squeezed all the air out of Carlos Hernandez, got to the RNC, finished the fight. Carlos Hernandez isn't exactly a nobody here in flyweight, so this was a pretty big win for him. 4-2 on the prelims right now. The last fight, which was the first one that got us started, was the worst fight, which was Tisha Pennington versus Luana Pinheiro. Tisha Pennington landed a pretty nice head kick to open up this fight, and I kind of just went on autopilot as far as watching it afterwards because the finish didn't happen in the first 3 minutes, so I kind of felt like taking a bite out of the corner of my monitor while I was just watching these women poke each other with jabs and front kicks until Tisha Pennington got her hand raised. Pretty uneventful way to open this fight. If you wanted to judge a book by its cover, this card would have sucked based off of the result that this fight produced, but I know to not judge the worth of a card until the first male fight happens. So yes, great event. Michael Moraels, don't like that he paints his nails, but you know what? A very good striker. And he gave a very heartfelt appreciation speech to his mama's boy. Very good stuff. Very based and rooted in good things person. He's not a wild man who's out here living crazy and dangerous. He's a family guy like Peter. I like Michael Moraels. I think that this is a guy that a lot of people can become fans of. And if he sticks around longer, he's probably going to end up learning English and getting even more fans. So, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the card as well. I will catch you dudes in the next upload. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And have a wonderful day. Peace.